All right, so principle number 4 in the world of Stoicism is this idea of having a view from above.
This is a very powerful meditative technique that allows us to have perspective in those times where we might be getting lost in some of the details, the nitty-gritty of life. Marcus Aurelius, who I've spoken about in previous classes, writing in the Meditations, remember this book wasn't intended for us to read, this was his private journal, regularly reminds himself of the impermanence of time, the impermanence of others, the impermanence of himself. This quote, he says, "People who are excited by fame forget that the people who remember them will soon die too." Perspective. I mean, he was a Roman emperor, and he realized that the kinds of things that people are chasing, and I'm sure, Ali, you can think of modern examples, the kinds of things that people are chasing, in the end, don't have the value that they're trying to prescribe to them. And so by imagining ourselves in the corner of a room, observing ourselves, that's the first step. And you realize, oh, actually, that's not that big a deal. Then you imagine yourself outside your building and you look in and you think about all the issues that are going on amongst all these other people. And then you extend it, the road. Then you extend it as though you're looking down at Earth. And you know, there's a meme, I don't know if we can have it flash up on the screen. There's a meme that says, the Milky Way with Earth, the Milky Way without Earth, and the images are identical. Because quite frankly, we're tiny. And sometimes we need that perspective. And another one from Marcus Aurelius, which I think sums this up before I pass over to Ali, is the whole sea is a drop in an ocean. How quickly this will all be gone. 2 separate questions. So, Ali, I know that these kind of techniques have been helpful for you.
Yeah, I think this perspective thing is, again, like what we're trying to do here is get this kind of mental toolbox of different strategies that we can apply to different areas of our life, kind of with the ultimate goal of preserving our tranquility and living happy, healthy, productive lives, because that's what we're all about. And so when we come across a situation that disturbs our tranquility, we kind of run through our mental toolbox of things, okay, dichotomy of control, premeditating adversity, and kind of having a sense of perspective. And I really like this idea of kind of looking from the corner of the room and then kind of zooming out a little bit and thinking, does this actually matter in the grand scheme of things? One way that I think about it is this thing going to matter in 10 minutes time? What about 10 days time? What about 10 weeks time? What about 10 years time? And usually by the time I get to the 10 years, I'm like, actually, this, often even by the 10 days time, I get to the point where I'm like, yeah, this thing doesn't actually matter. And therefore I don't need to allow it to affect my tranquility. And this is another one of those kind of fundamental aspects of Stoicism, that when stuff affects our tranquility, it's often not the thing itself, but it's our internal interpretation. It's the story that we've told ourselves about the thing that is disturbing our tranquility. And so when it comes to zooming out and having some kind of perspective, there are so many situations that we can apply this to. There's one that I often used to use this for before it kind of became ingrained, and that was when I used to struggle to put my hand up in class to ask questions. Because kind of in my head, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to put my hand up to ask a question because A, it's going to be weird to interrupt people, and B, people are going to think I'm an idiot for not knowing the answer. C, people are going to think I'm a nerd because I've got the audacity to ask a question in a lecture. And then I just kind of zoom out a bit and be like, what the hell am I actually worried about? Like, who actually cares? If you have a little bit of sense of perspective, then you realize that this is such a trivial worry. And therefore I put my hand up and ask the question. And now I have like literally less than 0 qualms about putting my hand up in a lecture or in a class to ask a question about something I don't understand. And I kind of know that if I'm having that problem, a lot of other people are having that same problem as well. And also this idea of perspective extends beyond just kind of zooming out. It's also helpful to sometimes try and imagine situations from another person's point of view, like changing the perspective up a little bit. And, a fairly trivial example is, I remember when I was a medical student and we'd be on placements in hospitals and there'd be kind of senior doctors around us. Often as a medical student in that situation, you feel a little bit like, oh, I don't want to disturb them. I don't want to introduce myself because what if they get annoyed? And at the time, I always used to imagine myself from their perspective. Like, they're a doctor. And if I really imagine myself from that perspective, I realized that actually, if they've got a medical student on the ward, they'd probably want me to, say hello and be friends with me and want to explain stuff. And now that I am a doctor and I see medical students, I really appreciate the other side of that perspective. And so there's absolutely no need as a medical student to be shy about approaching the doctors. It makes their day when you're around because it makes life a little bit less boring because it gets very routine a lot of the time. And then when the medics are there, it's awesome. So it's just the idea, kind of, we want to keep in mind that we can zoom out from situations, but we can also zoom out into another person's perspective. And that often helps us kind of overcome whatever mental barrier is holding us back from leading our best lives, as they say.
Two things. One, earlier, I struggled to believe that you were ever shy in terms of asking questions. Number two, isn't it interesting to see that these guys were writing 2,000 years ago and how universal and timeless this philosophy is, that it can be applied by a med school student, it can be applied by a YouTuber, it can be applied by pretty much anyone. Very, very powerful tool.
And as always, there's a worksheet in the class project section that helps you kind of guides you through different exercises that you can do to kind of help make this thought process a little bit easier. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.